The quiet hum of lights filled the air inside a bright jewelry store in Portland, Maine. Glass cases lined the walls, each one glowed with necklaces, rings, and gemstones that sparkled under carefully placed lights. Every piece seemed to whisper its own story, waiting for someone to claim it. At the entrance, Ruth stepped inside. She carried a worn leather purse over her shoulder, her silver hair tucked neatly beneath a beret. In her late 70s now, Ruth's warm smile and kind eyes lit up as she looked around the store she knew so well. This was her son Eric's pride and joy, his jewelry shop that had become one of the most admired places in town. Every time Ruth walked in, her heart swelled with pride, knowing her boy had built this dream from nothing. Today, Ruth came a surprise. Every few weeks, she brought Eric lunch from his favorite cafe, loving these small visits where she could watch him work and see the joy on his face. But this time, Eric wasn't there. A clerk at the counter explained he had stepped out to meet a supplier and would be back soon. Ruth didn't mind. She took her time strolling through the aisles, her fingertips brushing gently against the glass cases. Memories and warmth filled her heart as her eyes fell on a pair of diamond earrings. They looked just like the ones she once owned, before life's hardships forced her to sell them many years ago. For a moment, she leaned closer, her mind drifting back to the past. But then, her fingers slipped. One of the earrings tipped over and fell with a soft clink onto the floor. Ruth's heart jumped. She bent down carefully, embarrassed, hoping no one noticed. Just as she reached for the earring, the sharp sound of heels clicked against the floor. Looking up, Ruth saw a tall woman with a stern face standing above her. She didn't recognize the saleswoman, clearly new to the store. The woman's cold expression carried no warmth, none of the friendliness Ruth was used to hear. Still, Ruth tried to smile as she stood up, holding the earring. "I'm so sorry, dear," Ruth began gently. "I just want a closer look. This reminds me of—" But the saleswoman cut her off with a piercing glare. Crossing her arms, she looked Ruth over with suspicion. Her voice was sharp, like broken glass. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded. Startled, Ruth straightened herself and held up the earring carefully. "I accidentally knocked it over," she explained softly. "I was only admiring it." "Admiring it?" the saleswoman sneered. "You mean pocketing it, don't you?" The words hit like a slap. Ruth froze, her breath catching in her throat. "Pocketing it? That's absurd. I've never—" But the woman wasn't listening. Her eyes scanned Ruth's modest coat and worn purse, and something cruel flickered in her gaze. Her voice dropped, laced with venom. "People like you don't belong in stores like this." Ruth's hand trembled as she held out the earring. "I think there's been some misunderstanding," she tried to say, but the saleswoman suddenly snatched the earring from her with force. "Save your excuses," she snapped. "I'm calling the police." Ruth's heart pounded. "The police? That's not necessary." "Please, I didn't do anything wrong." But the woman ignored her. With unnerving calm, she dialed her phone. "Yes, this is Golden Grace Jewelers. We've caught someone trying to steal a diamond earring. She's still here. I've detained her." "Detained?" Ruth whispered, clutching the strap of her purse. Disbelief washed over her. Moments later, the store doors swung open. 2 tall police officers entered, their uniforms crisp, their expressions unreadable. They walked straight toward the saleswoman, who wasted no time pointing at Ruth. "This woman was caught red-handed trying to steal," she declared. "I had to stop her before she fled." Ruth's hand shook. "I wasn't stealing," she pleaded. "It was an accident. Please, I'm the owner's mother." The officers exchanged a glance but said nothing. One stepped toward Ruth, his gaze hard. "Ma'am, I need you to step forward." Her knees felt weak as she obeyed. "Please, this is a mistake," she whispered. But before she could explain further, the officer grabbed her arm roughly, pulling her to the side. The officer's sudden grip made Ruth stumble, and she winced as they twisted her hands behind her back. "What are you doing?" she cried, panic flooding her voice. Cold handcuffs snapped around her wrists with a harsh metallic click. The sound seemed to echo through the store, louder than anything else. Ruth stood frozen, too shocked to move, tears filling her eyes as she looked around for help. But no one came. The only face she saw was a saleswoman's smug smile watching her suffer. "I didn't steal anything," Ruth pleaded, her voice breaking as tears ran down her cheeks. "You're making a mistake." One of the officers spoke in a flat, emotionless voice. "You can explain yourself at the station." The word struck Ruth like a blow. The station? She had lived through hardships, through decades of struggles, but never in her life had she been treated like this. The humiliation cut deep. She felt like a criminal, even though she had done nothing wrong. The officers began leading her toward the door, their grip firm and unyielding. Ruth's mind raced. How could this be happening in her own son's store? The place that always felt safe. Just as they reached the entrance, a powerful voice rang out across the room. "What the hell is going on here?" The officers stopped. Ruth turned her head and saw Eric standing in the doorway. Her heart leapt at the sight of him, his face burning with confusion and fury. Eric froze for only a moment before striding forward, his presence commanding the room. His suit, normally sharp for business meetings, looked slightly wrinkled as if he had rushed back. His jaw was clenched, his movements sharp, and his eyes locked onto the scene before him. His mother in handcuffs, the officers gripping her arms, and the saleswoman watching with satisfaction. "Take those off her," Eric ordered, his voice low but shaking with anger. One officer shifted uneasily. "Sir, we were responding to a theft complaint." "Take them off," Eric repeated, each word sharp and cold. His eyes softened only when they turned toward his mother. "Are you okay, Mom?" he asked, his fists tightening at his sides. Ruth's voice trembled. "I didn't do anything, Eric. I just dropped an earring." Eric's gaze snapped to the saleswoman, his face like stone. "Miss Turner, would you care to explain why you thought calling the police on my mother was a good idea?" The woman faltered. "Sir, I didn't know she was your mother. She dropped the earring and it looked like, well, I thought she was trying to—" "You thought?" Eric's voice cut like a blade. "What gave you the right to assume my mother of all people was a thief?" "I didn't mean," Miss Turner stammered, her confidence collapsing. "I was just trying to protect the store." Eric let out a harsh laugh with no humor. "Protect the store? From my own mother? Do you have any idea what you've done? You didn't just insult her. You insulted me and everything this business stands for." He gestured toward Ruth, still trembling. "Look at her. Does she look like a thief to you?" Miss Turner opened her mouth, but no words came. Eric turned back to the officers, his anger rising. "And you too. Are you seriously just standing there? Do you have any evidence she stole anything, or did you just take this woman's word for it?" The officers exchanged uncomfortable looks before one finally stepped forward and removed Ruth's handcuffs. Eric rushed to his mother's side, rubbing her wrist gently. "I'm so sorry, Mom. You should never have been treated like that." Ruth shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't understand how it got this far." Eric straightened, his anger burning again, his eyes locked on Miss Turner. "This ends now. You're fired. I don't need people like you representing my business." Her face turned pale. "Sir, please, I know." "I don't care," Eric interrupted, his tone final and cold. "Get out. Now." Her hands shook as she grabbed her things and hurried out, avoiding everyone's eyes. Eric turned to the officers. "And you too, you owe my mother an apology. She's been humiliated enough." One officer cleared his throat nervously. "We were following protocol based on complaint." "Protocol?" Eric snapped. "Your protocol is to slap handcuffs on an elderly woman without even investigating? That's what you call protecting and serving." The officers stayed silent, their confidence gone. Finally, one mumbled, "We're sorry, ma'am." Ruth gave a small nod, her face unreadable. Eric guided her to a chair near the counter. "Sit down, Mom," he said gently, resting a hand on her shoulder. "I'll take care of everything." As Ruth sank into the seat, Eric turned back to the officers. "You can leave. I'll be filing a formal complaint about how this was handled." The officers hesitated, then nodded and left, their departure heavy with silence. Eric knelt beside Ruth, his voice soft again. "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" Ruth shook her head, resting her hand on his. "I just want to go home." Eric exhaled, frustration and relief mixing in his chest. We'll go soon. But first, I'm going to make sure this never happens again. In the days that followed, the storm only grew. Calls, statements, and legal battles that refused to be ignored. Eric wasted no time. He filed an official complaint against the officers and pressed charges against Miss Turner for assaulting his mother. Ruth, though shaken, supported his decision. She knew this wasn't just about her. It was about making sure no one else would go through the same humiliation. News of the incident spread quickly. Golden Grace Jewelers, once admired for its elegance, was suddenly at the center of heated conversations about prejudice and accountability. Many customers voiced their support for Eric, while a few questioned his choice to fire Miss Turner so publicly. Eric didn't waver. There's no room for that kind of behavior in my business, he told a local reporter, and there shouldn't be room for it anywhere. Meanwhile, Miss Turner was facing her own reckoning. Security footage from the store made everything clear. The slap, her cold refusal to hear Ruth's explanation, and even the officer's rough handling of Ruth. Outrage only grew. In court, Miss Turner looked nothing like the confident, stern woman from the store. She sat at the defense table small and fragile, her hands trembling. The prosecutor laid out the case with calm precision, using the footage and witness testimony to show the truth. Ruth, at Eric's insistence, did not testify. He knew it would be too painful for her to relive the experience in public. The video and statements from the officers, who admitted they had acted too quickly, were enough. Their admission brought some relief, but it didn't erase the pain. Even as the trial unfolded, Ruth wrestled with emotions. She was grateful for Eric and the community's support, but the memories haunted her. The sting of the slap, the sound of handcuffs, and the judgment in strangers' eyes. The jury deliberated only a few hours before returning with a unanimous verdict. Guilty on all counts. Miss Turner was convicted of assault and defamation. The judge sentenced her to community service and mandatory sensitivity training. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Eric spoke firmly, his voice carrying weight. "This isn't just about what happened to my mother," he said. "It's about making sure no one else has to face this kind of treatment. Discrimination has no place in our society, and it's up to all of us to fight it." Ruth, standing beside him, spoke softly but with conviction. "I've lived a long life and I've seen too much of this. But I believe in my son, and I believe we can do better. We have to." The crowd murmured in agreement as cameras flashed. Ruth's resilience and Eric's determination had transformed a personal injustice into a call for change. In the days that followed, a sense of closure began to settle, though scars remained. Friends and family surrounded Ruth with love and laughter, helping her heal. Golden Grace Jewelers also changed. Eric introduced new training programs on fairness and respect, inviting community leaders to hold workshops. His business became known not just for fine jewelry, but as a place where everyone was welcome. Slowly, the store's reputation recovered, strengthened by Eric's transparency and resolve. For Ruth, life moved toward a new normal. She returned to her weekly visits, greeted now with extra warmth by staff and customers. The experience had changed her, but it hadn't broken her. If anything, it made her stronger. One afternoon, sipping tea in Eric's office, Ruth looked at her son with pride. "You've done well," she said softly. "Not just with the store, but with standing up for what's right." Eric smiled, resting his hand on hers. "I had a good example to follow. You taught me resilience." Beyond the store, their story spread widely, sparking conversations about prejudice and accountability in towns far beyond Portland. That evening, as Eric walked his mother to the door, the setting sun cast a golden glow over the street. Ruth paused, taking in the view, then looked back at her son. "I know this wasn't easy," she said, "but you turned something awful into something meaningful. That's how change begins." Eric nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "And it's not over. There's still more to do." Ruth smiled, her heart filled with hope. "One step at a time, son." As she left, the bell above the door chimed softly. A sound once routine, now a reminder of strength and progress. The world wasn't perfect. Ruth knew that. But she also knew change was possible. One step, one story, one act of courage at a time.